Good morning once more. You know, when the weather is as gloomy as it looks out there, you might be forgiven for not believing that I'm wishing you a good morning. But the morning is good. Yeah. Before I go into some of the things I wanted to say, I also want to dispel a narrative that has been building with these stories of punishment from our mothers. They were not evil people. Now that I am reading a book called The Four Disciplines of Execution, I see my mother in that book. She was merely a disciplinarian. Yeah? So, and discipline is a good thing, isn't it? Good. With that, I can say thank you for making time to reflect on and discuss solutions for an issue that has been with us since colonial era Nairobi and some of the fledgling towns in those days. I think the experts in the room will relate to this. This problem revolves not wholly, but primarily around rural labor conditions and the urban crisis that attended it. This is an issue that is easy to walk past, but as we have seen increasingly, is an issue that is impossible to ignore, which is homelessness. And of course, there's the streetism that is associated with it. They are not one and the same things, but they are cousins, if I can use some of the political lingo out here. Why are we here today? We are here to move, therefore, from concern to coordination, from sympathy to systems. So as we begin this conversation, it's not ending today. Today is merely another start. One of the things that I would like to call on all of us to do is to convert this into a working meeting where we can get some honest diagnosis, some practical options, and clear commitments. As Evans was getting excited about having sat next to his worship, the former mayor, I felt like telling him, cool down, cool down. I've been chatting this gentleman for a whole hour. So you can imagine, I don't have enough airtime to share with you all the wisdoms. And they go beyond Ziwani. But if all of us can focus on this problem and get some real solutions on the table, and then energize ourselves to actually work on those things, we are well on our way to making the contribution of this generation, either in lessening the problem or in ending it. Of course, we can all relate to homelessness as something that is multi-causal, but we also should relate to the fact that responsibility for it is shared. Because I want to leave this room safely, I will not say some of us have contributed to it. Let me just leave it there. But we do have a shared responsibility in the situation that we see playing out, not just in this town, but other towns out there. I hope this conversation is not going to be about, as it is commonly said, cleaning the streets. Yeah? It should be about restoring lives, because these are not just fellow humans, some of them are actually our relatives, isn't it? And we need to move from the kind of short-term, visceral sweeps that we see that are about simply moving people conveniently off the street so that they can stop embarrassing us, to actually solving a problem. When I think about the role of Undugu in this regard, we've had a long track record inspired by Father Arnold Grohl. When I first learned about this gentleman, he began these efforts when I was a year old in 1973. And because he refused to see streetism as a normal part of Nairobi life, he began working with street-connected children and youth on family reintegration, skills, recovery, shelter, education, livelihoods, and advocacy. Things that we still do today. And I think around those things, we've developed a set of values that we might also feed into this conversation. The values of dignity and rights. And I think in some of the side conversations we've been having, dignity has been one of the common threads in those conversations. Safeguarding children, because some of the people on the streets are people who shouldn't even be on the streets from the standpoint of the elements and from, the diseases they could catch and God knows what else a child could end up with out there. We need to make sure our practice in regard to our colleagues on the streets is trauma-informed. And again, thank you, Patrick, for inspiring people to share their traumas. If I had been given more airtime, I would have talked about a lot more of my own. And sometimes these things influence how we relate to things and how we deal with them. I want to call on us also to think about evidence-led interventions. Some of the wisdoms that Dr. Joe Akech was sharing with me are about things that were done, like taking a number of street people, boys, girls, to NYS. The numbers in those days were really small. And at that point, we had proof of concept. But because we are not doing things in a way that is led by evidence, we allowed ourselves again to go back to a situation where it looks as if we have hardly done anything. And yet there were things that were done that actually provided some evidence of what policy could do if it was not just well made, but also well executed. And of course, the value of partnership and accountability. As organizations, we are in this together, and there's a way of working in which, if there's horizontal accountability, we can actually move together. What does success look like? Our goal is not to manage homelessness. This might sound overly ambitious, but it is to end it for people, one pathway at a time, and to reduce it at the overall population level. It is possible in our time, ladies and gentlemen. And this is why, even in the current Undugu strategic plan for 2023 to 2027, we've seized that challenge. Will we have achieved it by 2027? Probably not. But if we do things right, we will have sowed enough seeds for the harvest that is to come. Some suggested pathways revolve around prevention, reducing the inflow or the influx, if you want to call it that. Protection, which is about immediate safety and services. We need to think about provision also. This takes us in the domain of case management, housing, and livelihood. And we need to think about sustenance, which is about not just sustaining the momentum of these efforts, but also aftercare and community integration so that we close the loop from where we began in terms of prevention. As I move towards concluding, there are some suggested agenda outcomes. Again, this is not a closed conversation, merely some conversation pointers for all of us. If this conversation is to get us where we need to go, we need to come out of this room with a shared problem statement. It might be incomplete, but it needs to come out looking like the makings of it. And we need to help each other define things. Yeah, who are we talking about here? Adults? Families? Street-connected children or youth? Or displaced persons? Or all of the above? Because many of the things we see out here have got drivers, and we need to relate to those drivers. We need to come out of here also with a mapped service ecosystem, yeah? Asking ourselves, who's doing what, where are the gaps, yeah? What we need also moving forward, in my view, is coordination mechanisms, because humans acting together can accomplish a lot. But if there's no coordination, I'm sure some of you can relate to the Tower of Babel, and we don't need that, especially at this time. Lastly, for me, we need a short resource and policy ask, a list of things that we can go to policymakers and say, this is what is needed, and here is the evidence that it will take us in a particular direction. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how we will re-energize this process. As I end, a few things that you might also want to reflect on. There's a question of expertise, and we've got a lot of it here. I was really glad to see in the build-up to this that we were actually bringing the people who have a lived experience with streetism and street connectedness into the room. In my view, they are the most important expertise, and we need to tap into what they know about life on the streets as much as possible. And that way, we can see today's discourse not as a story merely to inspire us, but also as evidence to guide us in the direction that we want to go. Lastly, for me, it's a call to action. Let's be ambitious, but let's be practical. Yeah, let's live here, and here again is another wisdom that was coming from our hour-long conversation, with fewer recommendations. Yeah, but more responsibilities. I hope I'm speaking to you, because some of the problems we see in these festering issues is because we talk too much. And in recent days, we have even been told so by foreigners. Yeah, we need to be people of action. Talk is good, but it's cheap. What's more important is actually walking the talk. As an organization, and that's Undugu Society of Kenya, we recognize that we can't do this alone, and neither can any of the other stakeholders. Government has a lot of our tax money, but they can't do it alone either. Civil society, and there's a lot of us in the room, can't do it alone as well. And you could talk about the private sector as well. But together, we can build a system where the street is not the default safety net, yeah? Where every child who thinks they have gotten a thorough beating at home doesn't think that the next place to be safe is the street, yeah? For instance, going back to some of the punishment and trauma-laden stories you guys were sharing. And I think if we do that, we should be just fine. And to continue to work in, day out, yeah, doing the boring work, yeah, that produces incremental results, and eventually we get somewhere. In fact, I think as I go, one of the anecdotes I can share with you about the nature of development and its complexities is you've got to imagine those garbage lorries on Bunyala Road, yeah. So as it tries going up the road, smoky and so on, one of the things you'll notice is there are some young men who begin running behind it and putting, you know, rocks behind the hind tires. Have you seen that? That's the nature and messiness of the development that we are talking about here. Some of us have to be ready to be those young men and boys ratcheting. Because if that doesn't happen, that lorry will go all the way back to Uhuru Highway with consequences for the cars behind it. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the kind of thing that we are being invited to talk about here.